Something inside you has already begun to change, though you may not yet recognize it consciously. The exhaustion you have carried for years, this bone-deep weariness from absorbing every emotion in every room, has started to shift into something else entirely. You may still feel the weight, but beneath it, a new structure is forming. This is not hope. This is metamorphosis already in motion. The psyche does not ask permission before it transforms you. It simply begins the work when you have suffered enough to become ready. And if you are here now, listening to these words, something in your unconscious has decided the time has come. What I am about to reveal will challenge everything you have been told about sensitivity. You have been taught that empaths must protect themselves, shield their energy, create boundaries to survive in a harsh world. This is not wrong, but it is incomplete. There exists a final stage of development that no one speaks of, a transformation so thorough that protection becomes irrelevant. You do not build walls, you become untouchable. Through decades of analytical work, I observed a pattern in those who carry extraordinary sensitivity. They do not remain vulnerable forever. Those who survive the dark night of empathic overwhelm, who refuse to close their hearts despite the pain, undergo a psychological metamorphosis that resembles nothing so much as alchemical transmutation. Lead into gold, wounds into wisdom, vulnerability into a power so complete that nothing external can destabilize it. The conscious mind cannot comprehend this. It knows only defense or surrender, armor or bleeding. But the unconscious operates according to different laws, and it has been preparing you for this transformation since the first moment you felt shattered by another's pain. What presents itself as your greatest weakness, this unbearable openness to others' suffering, is actually the raw material for a transformation so complete that you become psychologically untouchable. Not because you have hardened, not because you have learned to block, but because you have integrated something the armored never can. You have died and reconstituted yourself so many times that the structures which break in others no longer exist in you. This is the empath's final form, and it arrives in 7 stages. The first stage reveals itself when you stop trying to control what enters your field of awareness. For years you attempted every technique: visualization of white light, energetic shields, grounding practices, avoiding certain people, certain places, certain situations. Some of this helped, most of it exhausted you further. You were trying to dam a river with your hands. What emerges in this first stage is a profound surrender, but not the surrender of defeat. This is the surrender of the seed that stops resisting the breaking of its shell. You cease the endless vigilance. You stop scanning every room for threats to your energy. You allow yourself to feel what you feel without the secondary layer of panic about feeling it. The unconscious, according to depth psychology, refuses to be governed by will alone. Your empathic sensitivity is not a muscle you can train to contract on command. It is a fundamental feature of your psychic structure, and the more you fight it, the more it dominates you. In this first stage, you discover that the fight itself was draining you more than the sensitivity ever did. This does not mean you become passive. It means you stop exhausting yourself with the impossible task of controlling your own nature. You feel the sadness in the grocery store. You sense the anger in your colleague's forced smile. You absorb the heaviness in rooms where trauma lives. But you no longer add resistance to the experience. You simply allow it to move through you. The relief is immediate, not because anything external has changed, but because you have stopped splitting yourself in two, one part feeling, another part frantically trying not to feel. The energy you reclaim from this internal war is staggering. Second, there emerges a strange recognition that other people's darkness no longer destabilizes your center. You still perceive it. You may perceive it more clearly than ever, but it no longer pulls you into its gravity. This is not detachment in the cold sense, this is discrimination. The psyche has its own intelligence, operating beneath awareness. What it discovers through your years of suffering is this: other people's emotional states are information, not infection. You have been treating them as contagion, something that enters you and makes you sick. But the mature psyche understands that emotional resonance is simply data about the invisible currents in human interaction. You walk into a room where two people have just argued. You feel it immediately, the tension, the unspoken hostility. In earlier years, this feeling would lodge in your chest, create anxiety, make you want to fix or flee. Now, you simply note it. Conflict here, the information register. But it does not recruit your nervous system into reenacting the stress. This capacity develops not through technique but through exhaustion. You have been colonized by others' emotions so many times that your psyche finally learns to differentiate between what is yours and what is merely passing through your awareness. The boundary forms not as a wall but as a kind of psychic discernment, an inner knowing that says, I perceive this, but I am not this. The third transformation appears as an unshakable discernment between resonance and responsibility. You have spent years believing that if you feel someone's pain, you must do something about it. This confusion has nearly destroyed you. What becomes clear through the individuation process is that resonance is passive, but responsibility is active. You can resonate with suffering without being responsible for alleviating it. The empath's curse is the unconscious equation. I feel it, therefore I must fix it. The empath's liberation is the dissolution of that equation. You encounter someone in deep grief. You feel the grief as if it were your own. This has not changed, but where once you would have immediately begun trying to comfort, advise, or absorb their pain to relieve them of it, now you simply hold space. You allow them their grief. You do not rush to make it stop because their pain is not unbearable to you anymore. You have learned that feeling someone's suffering is not the same as drowning in it. This distinction cannot be taught. It must be lived into. I recall a woman who came to me after years of what she called empathic burnout. She worked in healthcare and felt every patient's fear as her own. She would go home shaking, unable to sleep, carrying the accumulated terror of 20 dying people in her body. Every practitioner told her she was too sensitive for the work. She needed to detach, create distance, protect herself. But this was not the problem. The problem was that she believed feeling their fear meant she had to take it from them. She was trying to suffer on their behalf, as if her suffering could somehow reduce theirs. What emerged in our work was the recognition that she could be fully present to their fear, could hold it with them, without making it hers to carry home. The fear could move through her awareness without taking up residence in her nervous system. Within months, the exhaustion lifted. She became more effective, not less empathic. She could sit with the dying in a quality of presence that actually comforted them, precisely because she was not frantically trying to fix their fear. She had stopped confusing resonance with rescue. What manifests forth is a capacity to witness suffering without absorbing it into your own psychic structure. This is the stage where the transformation becomes visible to others. People begin to seek you out not because you make them feel better, but because you make them feel seen. The wounded healer archetype operates through this mechanism. You have been so thoroughly broken by suffering that you no longer fear it. You do not recoil from pain. You do not need to fix it to make yourself comfortable. You can simply be with it. And this quality of witnessing is more healing than any advice you could offer. Depth psychology reveals that most people do not need solutions. They need presence. They need someone who can look directly at their darkness without flinching, without trying to illuminate it prematurely, without rushing toward false hope. You become capable of this because you have sat with your own darkness for so long that no one else's can shock you. You listen to someone describe their shame, their rage, their despair. Where others might offer reassurance or try to reframe the pain into something more palatable, you simply say, "Yes, I see it." You do not minimize, you do not fix, you bear witness. And in that witnessing, something shifts in them. Not because you have done anything, but because they have been truly seen. This is power that cannot be taught in any training. It emerges only from having descended into your own underworld and returned. You know the terrain. You are not afraid of the dark. The fifth stage brings an unexpected phenomenon. Your presence alone begins to alter the energy of spaces you enter. You have become what depth psychology calls an energetic anchor. Your nervous system has been so thoroughly regulated through the fires of transformation that it now functions as a tuning fork for others. This is not conscious effort. You are not projecting calm or attempting to shift the energy. But because you have integrated so much chaos within yourself, because you no longer react to disturbance with disturbance, your mere presence creates a field of stability. Anxious people feel less anxious near you. Chaotic environments settle slightly when you arrive. This is not magic. This is the natural effect of a psyche that has achieved a high degree of integration. The self, in its wisdom, radiates order. When you have done the work of individuation, when you have faced your shadow, integrated your wounds, stopped identifying with your ego's endless reactivity, you become a kind of psychic stabilizer. Others feel this without knowing why. They describe you as grounding, as peaceful, as someone in whose presence they can finally breathe. You do not do this to them. You simply are this, and it is the most effortless power you will ever wield. Beyond this lies a paradoxical truth. You become more sensitive, not less, yet invulnerable in ways the armored can never achieve. This confounds people. They expect that to become untouchable, you must grow thick skin, learn to care less, distance yourself from feeling. But this is the path of defense, and defense always fails eventually. Your path has been different. You have become so sensitive that you perceive layers of reality others miss entirely. You feel the unspoken, you sense the symbolic, you register shifts in energy that most people remain unconscious of. But this sensitivity no longer wounds you because you have discovered what lies beneath it. According to my research into the structure of the psyche, extreme sensitivity is often the ego's experience of contact with the collective you, unconscious. You are perceiving not just individual emotions, but archetypal forces, patterns that move through all of humanity. When you feel overwhelmed in crowds, you are not just picking up individual distress. You are sensing the collective anxiety, the shared shadow, the accumulated suffering of the unconscious mass. The untrained empath experiences this as personal assault. The individuated empath recognizes it as impersonal force. You still feel it, perhaps more acutely than ever, but you know it is not yours. You are simply the one conscious enough to perceive what everyone else is unconsciously radiating. This knowing changes everything. You stand in a crowd and feel the desperate loneliness beneath the social performance. You feel the rage masked as politeness. You feel the grief people have buried so deep they no longer know it is there. But you do not take it in as personal burden. You recognize it as the human condition, moving through its expressions. You are witnessing the unconscious at work, and witnesses cannot be wounded by what they observe. The armored person protects themselves by numbing. They feel less, and they call this strength. But numbness is not invulnerability. It is simply death of the feeling function. You have chosen the harder path, to remain utterly sensitive while developing a core so integrated that nothing can destabilize it. This is the difference between a wall and a diamond. The wall resists. The diamond allows everything to pass through it, yet remains unbroken. The seventh and final form emerges when the distinction between self and other dissolves, not into merger, but into sovereign clarity. This is the stage few reach because it requires the complete death of the ego's sense of separateness. You no longer experience yourself as a distinct entity that must protect itself from other distinct entities. You recognize that all psychic phenomena arise in the same field of consciousness. What I came to understand through decades of observation is that the psyche is not confined to the body. The unconscious is collective, archetypal, shared. When you feel another person's emotion, you are not being invaded by something foreign. You are perceiving a movement in the shared psychic field that you both inhabit. There is no self and other in the unconscious. There is only the self. This is not a philosophical position. This is direct experience that arises when the individuation process reaches completion. You feel someone's anger, but you do not experience it as their anger entering you. You experience it as anger arising in the field of consciousness that connects you. The distinction seems subtle, but the felt difference is total. When there is no separate self to be invaded, invasion becomes impossible. You have become untouchable because you have realized there is nothing to touch. The ego structure that once felt so vulnerable has dissolved into something vast enough that no single emotion, no single encounter, no single person's energy can overwhelm it. You are no longer a separate self trying to protect itself from other separate selves. You are awareness it. Self, observing the play of psychic forces without identifying as any of them. This does not mean you lose your individuality. It means you stop confusing your individuality with separateness. You are distinct, but not separate. Unique, but not isolated. You maintain your personality, your preferences, your particular way of being in the world, but you no longer experience yourself as under siege. When someone directs rage at you, you feel it completely. But you recognize it as rage moving through the collective psyche, expressing itself through this particular person at this particular moment. You do not take it personally because you understand that nothing is personal. Everything is archetypal. Everything is the unconscious seeking consciousness through whatever form is available. This realization is the final liberation. You cannot be hurt because you are no longer defending a fixed position. You cannot be destabilized because you are no longer standing on unstable ground. You have dissolved into the ground itself. What you are becoming cannot be wounded because it no longer identifies with the structures that break. The ego breaks. The persona breaks. The defensive patterns you built to survive your sensitivity, they break too. But what you are now is not these structures. You are what remains when everything breakable has already broken. This is why you had to suffer so deeply. The empath who never breaks remains trapped in ego, trying endlessly to manage their sensitivity through control. But you were broken so completely that you had no choice but to discover what cannot break. And what you discovered is that beneath the vulnerable self is an indestructible presence that was never at risk. The wound was always the doorway. Your sensitivity was always preparing you for this realization. Every moment you felt shattered by another's pain, you were being initiated into deeper layers of consciousness. Every time you absorbed suffering you could not understand, you were being taught that you are vast enough to contain it all without being destroyed. You thought your empathy was a curse, but it was the mechanism by which you would be forced beyond the illusion of separation. Those who can remain comfortably numb never have reason to discover what lies beneath the personal self. You had no choice. Your sensitivity would not allow you the luxury of unconsciousness. It drove you, again and again, into experiences that shattered your boundaries until you finally understood that boundaries were the problem, not the solution. Now you know what the armored can never know. You have died to the defended self and been resurrected as something that needs no defense. You still feel everything, but you are no longer afraid of feeling. You perceive all the darkness in the human psyche, but you are no longer contaminated by it. You absorb the full spectrum of human experience, but you are no longer diminished by what you absorb. This is the empath's final form. Not the person who has learned to protect themselves from the world, but the one who has become so vast that the world cannot overwhelm them. Not the old, nay, who has built thicker walls, but the one who has dissolved the walls entirely and discovered they were never necessary. You who have suffered so deeply from your sensitivity now carry the mark of completion. What broke you has remade you into something unbreakable. What wounded you has initiated you into a power that operates beyond the logic of defense and attack. You are no longer the overwhelmed empath stumbling through life, drained by every encounter. You are the embodied integration of light and shadow, sensitive enough to perceive everything, strong enough to be moved by nothing. The journey is complete when you recognize that it was never about stopping the feeling. It was about becoming large enough to hold all feeling without being swept away. You are that largeness now, and nothing can touch what you have become.